Hello ladies and gentlemen, Sam with iCode Stuff here, bringing you back another tutorial. In today's video we will be working with NextJS again, as well as TailwindCSS to build a web form that submits data to Google Sheets. To give you an idea of what we will be building, let me show you the form and the spreadsheet. So let me close out of this. So as you can see on the right we have a TailwindCSS form. On the left, we have a Google spreadsheet. So just to demonstrate what it looks like. So if I fill out the information on the right, let's say LeBron James, LBJ at Lakers.com, give a fake phone number, all fives, and then maybe just a true message like, I am the greatest player ever, and then submit that. So as you can see, on the left, we have this new information over here. So LeBron James, LBJ at Lakers, the phone number, and the message. And then we just have this alert on the right side just saying, hey, this is the range that the form was submitted on the spreadsheet. And when we click OK, it clears our form. So I will just be showing you how to build that today. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is navigate to the Google Cloud Console, and then we can navigate to the console.developers.google.com/project create to make a new project. And for our project name, we will just say tutorial video, and then we can click create. Perfect. And then the next thing we want to do is navigate to the APIs and services page. You can just go to the same URL and then /API/dashboard. And then we can click the enable APIs, and then we can just search for Sheets. And then we can click on it. Then we can click enable. Perfect. If that's going to load. All right. The next thing we want to do is go to the credentials screen. And we're going to want to create new credentials. And we'll say a service account type. And we'll just say spreadsheet. And we can create and continue. Continue. And we just click done right now. And after we do that, we can download our service account, or we can click the service account, and then we go to the keys, add a key, create new key, and we're going to use JSON, and we're going to click create, which is going to download our JSON. Perfect. Cool. So then the next thing we want to do is go to the Google Docs as well. So we'll say docs.google.com/spreadsheets and then /u/4, and then we can create a new spreadsheet. We'll just call this tutorial. And then we can add in our information such as the name, the email, the phone, and the message. All right, so we have everything set. And then lastly, we just want to share access to that Google service account email. And we can share that. And then we can send and share anyway. Perfect. So now we have access to this Google spreadsheet. We have our Google service account JSON downloaded as well. So what we can do is go to our terminal and start setting up our project. All right, so we have our terminal open. As I mentioned earlier, we will be using TailwindCSS for styling the form, and then we're going to be using the Google APIs NPM package to access the Google spreadsheets. So what we can do is npx create next app, and we'll just say NextJS Sheets form tutorial, and all of this will be available on JSON, or not available on JSON, it will be available on GitHub. Cool. So we'll let that load for a second. All right, so that finished loading. What we can do is then navigate to the directory, and we'll clear this. And as I mentioned, Tailwind CSS, so what we can do is install the required Tailwind CSS packages. This is available on the Tailwind CSS docs for, I think, the Next.js guide in particular. So it's very easy to follow. All we have to do is install a couple packages. So we'll say npm install Tailwind CSS, then post CSS, auto prefixer, and then we're going to be using the Tailwind CSS /forms plugin, and we'll let that install. Cool, that finished running. Next up, we just want to set up our Tailwind CSS config by just running this quick command. Perfect. All right, so the next thing we want to do is open up our IDE and start editing some files. All right, so we have our IDE open. I'm going against the grain here and using WebStorm instead of VS Code. As I mentioned in past videos, I definitely prefer the JetBrains IDE just because I think there's more power to it. But I have no problem against VS Code. It's just my preference to use this IDE. And then for the theme, we're just using Material Palinite if you guys are interested. So yeah, so as mentioned earlier, we're just going to update our Tailwind config. So we have to update a couple things. Let's make sure this is 4 spaces instead. And then what we can do is paste some of our code. So this is just for purging our JSX or TSX files. And then for our plugin, we're going to be using the Tailwind Forms plugin, as mentioned. And we can reformat that. Perfect. And then what we want to do is update our styles global CSS file as well. So just paste that. And then the last thing we want to do is add our .env file. So we'll say .env.local. And we're going to need a couple of these values. So we're going to need the client email, the private key, and the Google Sheet ID, all of which should be available in our JSON file that we downloaded earlier. And let me just walk you through that actually. So I'm going to move this over to the directory. So I'm going to be deleting this service account so that you guys don't have access to it. So I don't really care to show you guys the key at the moment. But if we scroll and look at this JSON file, we see that there's a private key ID, private key, the client email, and a whole bunch of other data. The 2 things that we're going to be using in this video are the private key and the client email, as we mentioned here. So what we can do is just copy what we have here. This is a very long string. Okay. And we want to copy all of that, everything in between the like so. And then that doesn't look right. Hold up, 1 second. So let me recopy that. All right. So I'll copy this full thing like this. Copy. Paste. There we are. Okay. That was my bad. And then what we want to do is grab the client email as well. And we can paste that into here. And then lastly, we want to navigate to our spreadsheet. And we just have to copy this ID in the URL. And then paste. Perfect. All right. So we have everything set up. Next thing we want to do is install our Google APIs. So what we can do is just npm install Google APIs. Next up, we want to update our form or create a form in our home file. And so what we can do is let's reformat this code. Let's remove everything that's in here. And then what we can do is start writing our code. So as you saw in the video, or not the video, but in the preview at the start of the video, we have a very bare bones Tailwind CSS form. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're just going to add a couple classes, so it'll make the background slightly gray. And then we want to add a max width of about 5 XL, I believe. So max width of 5 XL, and then automatic margin. Add some padding. All right, cool. And then what we want to do is set up our form. We'll add some padding to the form as well, vertical padding, and then we'll add some space in between our form elements. Cool. All right. And so the next thing we can do is set up our div. So this is going to be an example like input group. So we can say div class name flex item center, then justify center, just to center everything, right? And then what we can do is add a label, and we can say HTML for the name, and then this is just going to be for screen readers only. We'll say name, and then we'll add the actual input itself. And I'm actually going to copy paste because I have a pre-configured style for this. Let's go ahead and paste that. All right, we'll remove this for the time being. And then what we can do is copy paste everything, because we're going to be using, as mentioned, so there's going to be name, there's going to be email, there's going to be phone, and there's going to be a message. All right, so let's go ahead, copy paste. And then for the last one, we are going to be using a text area instead of a input. And we'll just say your message and remove this. And then for the name, we'll say message, ID is message, HTML4 is message, like that. And then let's update the phone. Call this phone as well. Phone, type tel. And then we're going to have our email. Email, type is an email as well. ID email, name email. Okay, cool. All right, so that is set up. The next thing we want to do is prepare some variables for managing state. So what we can do is for our name, as we mentioned, so name, and we'll have set name, and then use state is default empty. All right, copy that a couple times. And then what we can say here is email, phone, message, and then set message, set phone, set email, and we are set. And then we can add or update some input values. So we can say the value is going to be the name, and on change, we're going to update that name like so. So event target dot value. All right, and then what we can do is copy paste this a couple times, right? And why is this? Oh, it's telling me to collapse the empty tag for some reason. Huh. Let me empty this. collapse. Here we are. All right. Then we can go ahead and update everything. So we'll say set email, phone, set phone, and then message, set message. All right. And I just realized what we need to do is add a button as well. And we can say button type is submit, class, let's add some flex, center everything, and then let's make the text small. Let's add a width of 64, just like the other inputs. And then what we can do is make it a bit rounded, add a shadow, add some not margin, but padding, vertical and horizontal, make the text white, and then let's add a background of indigo of 500, and we'll close that. All right. So what we can do now is actually get our server running so we can see if everything looks correct. What's going on here? Oops. All right, so let's open up our server. Drag that over here. All right, so it looks like we have the name, and you know what? We have to update our placeholders, your email, your phone, and then for our button, this should not be close. It should say submit. All right, cool. So it looks like everything is set design wise. So the next thing we want to do is prepare our submit, our form submission. So what we can do is create a new function called handle submit, and we'll make it an asynchronous function. And since we're using TypeScript, we can add some types. It's going to be an expected form event with the HTML form element. And then by default, we want to prevent the default behavior so that the form doesn't reload when we set it or when we submit it. Cool. And the next thing is we want to prepare our body. So we'll just say const form is equal to the name, email, phone, and message. And we'll prepare this for submit via API. But for the time being, we can just console everything out like so. And then for our on submit, we can just say handle submit. And we can inspect elements, go to our console. This is a message. All right, so if we look at our console, we have the email, message, name, and phone number. Now what we want to do is submit it to Google Sheets via API. So what we can do is create a new page or new file within the API directory, and we will call this submit.typescript, like so. And then the next thing we can do is prepare our handler function. And it's going to be asynchronous by default. And we'll say handler. And we expect to pass in a next API request as well as a next API response. And then the first thing we do is, if the request method isn't a post, It's just like some middleware basically. We can throw an error and say status is a 405, and we'll send the message that only post requests are allowed. And the next thing we can do is prepare a type called, we'll just say sheet form. And this is going to be based off of the data that we have here of the name, email, phone, and message. So we'll say name is string, email is a string, phone string, and message string. Alright, and so the next thing we do is grab the body out of the request. We'll say request.body. So if you guys can see, so the request body is type any. So what we can do is say as sheet form, and this makes that from any to an expected type of sheet form. Alright, so the next thing we do is prepare our try catch methods for submitting to the Google API. And so what we have to do is import Google from Google APIs, like so. So the first step is prepare auth, like the authentication to Google. So const auth is equal to new google.auth.googleauth, parentheses, brackets. For our credentials, we're just going to pass in our client email. This is going to be our local env variables that we added, .env.google client email. And then for our private key, we can say process.env.google private key. And then we want to replace via regex, we want to replace the new lines. We'll say new line G and backslash new line, and that will replace, so if we go to the env, we can see the new lines, we can replace those. Alright, going back, so we have our auth set up. The next thing is we want to add some scopes, and this is available on the Google documentation, but we need write access to the drive, the file, and spreadsheets, like so. Alright, so now that we have our auth set up, the next thing we do is grab our sheet. So google.sheets, pass in our auth, and we want version 4. And the next thing we can do is append data to that spreadsheet, like so. So we're going to await, because this is a asynchronous method. So spreadsheets values append. Alright, for our spreadsheet ID, we're going to be using that Google Sheet ID. For our range, if we go back to our spreadsheet, open it up, the range is going to be from A1 to D1, so name, email, phone, and message. So we can pass that in and say A1 D1. And for the value input option, we have to put this user entered. And then for our request body, we'll pass in the values. And then what we can say is pass in another array. We'll just say body name, body dot email, body dot phone, and then body dot message. Alright, and the last thing we do is return a status of 200 and present our JSON data that we see. like so. Data. All right. And then in the event that it fails, we can return a 500 error. And then we can return the message of error. So grab the message from the error object. And if it doesn't exist, we'll just say something went wrong. Perfect. Cool. So we have our API practically set up. Now we just have to go ahead and test it. So let's go back to our handle submit, and we're going to utilize the fetch helper method. So response, so fetch, and since we're using the API and it's the submit file, we have to say API/submit. Then we have to pass in some header options, or not header options, but attributes. So the first thing is the method, of course. It has to be a post. For our headers, we just want everything as JSON. So I'll just say application JSON. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to do the same thing for content type, like so. Paste that. Lastly, we want to add the body, and we're going to stringify it as JSON, and we'll pass it like so. And then what we can do is present that response to the screen. Nope, you know what? We actually have to grab the JSON from that response. So content is equal to, and we're going to await because fetch is asynchronous as well, response.json. All right, and it looks like we have somewhat of an issue. What don't you like? JSON does not exist on type promise because you know what? I did not await the fetch. Cool. And then what we can do is alert our content. And if we go back to the submit file, we can see that it's expecting data. So we can say content.data, and we can say table range for right now, because it should input the table range, I believe. Yeah, it will input the table range into the response. And then what we can do is we can empty our input fields by just passing in empty, or passing an empty state. Let's say phone, set name, and set email. This isn't very realistic. We wouldn't really see this in production level code. This is just for testing. I want to empty out the input values, and so that's what we're doing. I'm going to add a console log to the content as well, just to see what everything looks like. And then we can remove this. We can load everything. We can go back, and let's cross our fingers and hope that this works. So we have everything set. Yeah, all right. And we have our Google Sheet over here. So let's submit. All right, so it looks like we have a failure going on, and it looks like a 500 internal server error, cannot read message of undefined. So let's go ahead and investigate this. All right, so some of you guys may have caught it already, but I think the issue that we had is, so it's telling me that it can't read property of message undefined. And I think the issue is because I used a period instead of a comma, a silly mistake. I'm just going to remove this for right now, just so that we have all of our errors removed. And I'm just going to console.error our error in the event that there is an error. This will just input it to our terminal over here if something does go wrong. All right, so we fixed that. Let's go back and try to test out our code. And let's click submit again and cross our fingers that this works this time. And it looks like, yep, so it looks like we got some content back. Let's go to our Google spreadsheet, and it looks like we were able to add our data to the sheet. So yeah, that is the gist of the video. It went a bit longer than I had hoped, but I do hope that it helps out some people looking to work with Next.js and Google Sheets. If you guys like this video, please leave a like down below. Subscribe if you enjoy these types of tutorials, and I will see you in the next video.